You probably don't know what I just said, but I said, "Hi, my name is Amanda. How are you?" This is the most common type of sign language among children, teens, young adults, and older adults. They can also um, read lips and a little bit of speaking. Um, I want to talk to you about the history of American Sign Language and how it came about, the different types of sign language, and where it continues to go into the future. Those are the three main points that I want to talk about today. I also use sign language in my life from when I was younger to my teen years, and not so much right now. I use it a little bit to sign my name, to say hello, um, and to talk a little bit. Um, I don't know if any of you know sign language, but maybe you use sign language when you use interpretive movement, interpretive dance, or you sign to a song, or you see somebody signing to somebody in the audience. When you're watching TV, there's a little box that pops up on the corner of your little screen, and you have a little person uh, signing to those who cannot hear the TV. Even though they would like to watch it, they can have somebody on their screen to translate. Um, I used sign language when I was younger for interpretive movement and interpretive dance. I would use it to speak to those in the audience who could not hear, but I still wanted to perform um, dancing, singing a song, so I would sign the words with just my hands and my whole body. Um, I'm going to discuss briefly the history of sign language, um, how it got its start, the types of sign language, and where it will continue to go on in the future. Sign language is very common. It's widely used. It is believed that it came from France or parts of Europe. Before, deaf children in France were not allowed to attend the same school as regular speaking children or children that could hear. Children who were deaf either did not go to school until a school was built for them. Then they attended a school for people who cannot hear. They were taught to read lips, to um, sign, and to master their native language. Um, so they read the lips, they mastered their native language, and they were taught to speak. Um, they were taught to try to learn the vowels, learn the sounds of letters and words and phrases, and to try and speak. Um, it Most people believe that it originated from France, um, that it came from somewhere in France or around that region. There's also some speculation that uh, it didn't come from France, that it came from Europe. Um, but some scientists and doctors believe that there is not a specific location that sign language came from. They cannot pinpoint a specific area. Um, the number of people, or I'm sorry, let me back up a second. I'm sorry. In 1770, in France, a system of signing was being used where one deaf person would teach another deaf person how to sign words, phrases, sentences, and then they would go and teach somebody else who could not hear. They would, when they would learn a new sign or phrase, they would teach one another um, that phrase or that sign. and so it became more developed and more widespread as the more words they learned, the more phrases they learned, and the more ways they learned how to speak. But the school system in France said that they cannot classify sign language as an actual language because it did not um, comply with the grammatical um, rules of French, so it cannot be a language. So they continue to teach them orally how to speak and how to read lips, but outside of the school system or outside of school, they continue to use their informal way of communicating to one another. It continued to flourish, as did the non-standard dialects that are still maintained and they're taught outside of the school system. Both are passed down through family and social ties. So their family members learn how to sign language and how to communicate with them, and their friends learn how to communicate with them as well. The number of people using sign language is very, very broad. Um, with American Sign Language, there's about 500,000 to 2 million people. Um, with British Sign Language, there is over 500,000 people using sign language, and with French Sign Language, there is about 300,000 people. Um, from 80,000 to 300,000. I'm sorry. And there's also International Sign Language, which accounts for Antarctica, Australia, um, Japan, Korea, um, the North Pole, I guess. I don't know if there's people there. But just the areas that don't speak French or um, British or America, or I guess it'd be English. So those who don't speak English. Um, Eng- sorry. American Sign Language is necessary for people to communicate to one another. They need to be able to read lips, sign, use a translator or interpreter. That way they can communicate to one another, whether it's in a school setting, a social setting, a job setting, or another setting like they want to go out to dinner, buy a car, go shopping. They need to find a way to communicate to one another. Translators, interpreters, and reading lips is a way to communicate their ideas, thoughts, and feelings in a way that's easier for them, but yet we can still understand them even though we hear. Um, it is important because interpreters have to have a wide knowledge to accommodate all the growing phrases and words. They have to be very patient and um, accommodating when it comes to expressing someone who cannot hear their thoughts, ideas, and feelings because they could get upset if it's interpreted the wrong way. And people who hear could get upset if the interpreter says something that they did not say. So interpreters and translators are hard to use, but they're still a good way and they are necessary to be used. The different types of sign language, like I said before, with British, English, French, and international, there's a wide range because you have to accommodate for each language, each dialect, each region, each country. They each have their own language. They each have their own sign language because each country is different. If you can't read Italian or speak Italian, an English deaf person cannot communicate to an Italian deaf person. There's a barrier there, their language barrier is in between that, and they cannot communicate properly. Um, so before, children were unteachable because they had that language barrier there before. So they had found a school just for them. They thought they were unteachable because they cannot hear, they cannot speak, they cannot say, I'm hungry, I need to go to the bathroom, I need a bath, and any of their needs. So they thought they were unteachable because they cannot hear. So they designed a way to communicate to them through sign language. Um, but, before, there was a man who wrote a book about deaf people, observations of deaf and mutes. He is said to have found a community of people who signed, did sign language before. Let me find her name. Abe de Lepe. She is said to have did an early form of sign language, but um, Pierre Desloge wrote the book that I had told you, the Observations of Deaf and Mute. He found a community that was already doing sign language. Zoda said that he found a community before Abe de Lepe, who was a teacher, before she began doing sign language. And then the future of sign language is just same way it's been coming through. It's very bright, and we will be using it for a very long time. We are going to be continuing to use it to continue to teach kids and adults how to sign language, because if your baby is born deaf, you as a mother and a father are going to need to know how to sign language and to teach it to your child. That way you can communicate to them and they're not feeling like they're um, different than everybody else. Um, there's also people becoming teachers with sign language. There's also people getting degrees to become translators and interpreters. Um, there's also people getting degrees in foreign languages, so they can transition people who speak one type of sign language to another. So if people want to come here from France or Japan and they know Japanese sign language, they can learn how to speak American sign language. So we've talked about the history of sign language, the importance of it, where it originated from, the different types of sign language. We've also talked about, um, I've talked about the dialects. I've uh, discussed why it's important. I'm sorry. Computer's freezing up on me. Okay, there we go. The special schools, how they were taught to read lips, to master their native language. I've talked about how they were unteachable and how they were able to overcome that barrier in the language barrier. Um, Also, when you see people outside of your school, and when you see them at the dinner or in a store, just think about how sign language has impacted them as an individual, but also has sign language has impacted their family, their friends, because they're able to communicate to them, and just how it has affected them and their family. Thank you for watching my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to comment.